Hello everybody and welcome back to Creation Myths. Today I am going to show you a relatively short conversation I had with Paul Price. It's only about 20 minutes long. Now Paul Price was previously affiliated with Creation Ministries International, and recently he's written a bit for Answers in Genesis. So he, knows his way around the creationist sphere, the major YEC organizations, and he's written a bit kind of, I'll say, professionally for these various organizations. This conversation was part of a longer show on genetic entropy. That's genetic entropy proposed by Dr. John Sanford in his book, Genetic Entropy and the Mystery of the Genome. As I record this, that book was recently reviewed by Dr. Zach Hancock. I'm going to link that down below, so definitely check that out. I've also covered it, and you can find my video on that down below as well. And Paul Price co-authored a response to the critics of genetic entropy with Dr. Sanford and Dr. Rob Carter some time ago. I'll link that below. And I responded to that response to me and other critics in video and in writing. Both of those things will be linked down below. So if you read and watch all of that stuff, congratulations, you're caught up on genetic entropy. So this show was on Standing for Truth. Again, what can I say? People, and by people I mean young Earth creationists that I've reached out to recently, are generally unwilling to come on my channel and talk to me. I don't know why that is, honestly, because I've had lots of very nice conversations with young Earth and old Earth creationists. What can you do? But if people aren't willing to come and on my channel and talk to me, then okay, I guess I have to be willing to go where other people are so that I can have these kinds of conversations. And it is what it is. But if I want to keep having these conversations, that's apparently what I have to do, because again, I invite people to come on my channel and they say no. So this was part of a longer show that Paul did on genetic entropy on Standing for Truth. I was towards the end here, so you'll recognize some of the other people here, a couple friends of the channel. We got Dr. Zach Hancock was on there, Dr. Joel Duff was on there, Grayson from Base Theory was on there, so you can watch the longer show. I'll link it down below. So when I came on near the end, rather than rehash all of kind of the definition things, like the definition of fitness and, kind of the background stuff, I skipped all those formalities and I just went right for the heart of the issue. Direct experimental evidence that invalidates Dr. Sanford's model of genetic entropy. So I brought that up with Paul, and that's what we spent our time talking about. I hope you find it an interesting and enlightening conversation. Enjoy.
Dan, you're muted. How are you? Welcome.
I'm great. How are all of you? It's been a long day. First week of the semester.
Yes, welcome.
But happy to be here talking about genetic entropy. I know Paul's been here forever, so I'm going to be really quick. I have one thing, and if we get to a second thing, then great, but we might not, and that's fine. But Paul, I'm going to be really quick. First thing is, it's not really a question. I just want to say thank you for refuting the Carter and Sanford 2012 H1N1 genetic entropy paper, A New Look at an Old Virus. I think you're familiar with the paper. I think Donnie and Sam know the paper I'm talking about. I forget the exact title. You know the paper I'm talking about, though?
Yeah, I know.
The 1918 H1N1 went extinct due to genetic entropy paper. And earlier, you said that in order to characterize the fitness effects of mutations, you have to actually directly measure the fitness of them. You have to compare and see if they actually have a negative effect. And you specifically said that you can't just line up current sequences and ancient sequences and compare them and note the differences and make an evaluation, right? You said the exact phrase you used, I think, was exercise in futility, if that's your approach to determining whether deleterious mutations or beneficial mutations are occurring in those sequences. But that is exactly what Carter and Sanford did in that 2012 study, where they claimed they showed that H1N1 went extinct. They documented a bunch of differences in those viral sequences from 1918 to 2012. But one thing they pointedly did not do, and I emailed Rob Carter about this and directly asked him, and he confirmed that this is correct, they did not measure fitness in those viruses, the old ones, the new ones, none of them. At no point did they directly evaluate the fitness of those viruses. So according to the standard that you established just a little while ago, that study fails to demonstrate genetic entropy because they didn't directly measure fitness. Instead, they just compared the sequences, which, again, your words, exercise in futility. So my first thing is I just want to thank you for finally, after all these years, agreeing with me about that paper.
Yeah, and I'm not going to speak for Doctors Carter or Sanford, and I think you know, I know that you have written in on this, and they have actually given a response to you in the article, which is Genetic Entropy Defense at creation.com.
Which
And
you're
I'm not
just to
going to
be
be able
clear.
to do a better job of answering than they did. And at the end of the day, if I grant you, let's say for the argument that they made a mistake, I'm not saying they did make a mistake, but if they did make a mistake, that isn't really relevant to anything that I've presented tonight, and it's not
Okay.
relevant to anything Dr. Sanford wrote in his book either. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to stand here and defend their paper to you.
Okay.
I will say that I don't think I'm not aware of anybody that has written in the published peer-reviewed literature to raise the objection that you're currently raising. So maybe that's something you can do, and then maybe they can respond in the literature. That would be appropriate, but it would be inappropriate for me to try to defend their paper because I'm not
That's fair.
in that league to be able to do something like that.
That's fair. Second thing, and I promised I'd be really fast, so I'm going to be very fast. Just a couple minutes ago, and I think earlier as I was listening on my drive home, I heard you say it as well, something to the effect of you're encouraging people to like be familiar with the literature on this topic, right? Make sure you like read the literature, know the background, so that when you talk about it, you're not, getting basic things wrong. I want to ask you if you're familiar with the Springman et al. 2010 paper. The title is Evolution at a High Imposed Mutation Rate. Adaptation Obscures the Load in Phage T7. Are you familiar with that paper? Because it is one of the most important publications on this topic.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, and I'm actually kind of surprised that you don't remember that I am familiar with it. Maybe you're just saying that for the sake of argument or whatever, but
I genuinely don't remember. Sorry.
okay. It's actually something I wrote in response to you because you posted about this on Reddit. Like, what was that now? Like 4 or
5 years
5
ago.
years ago?
Yeah, right.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I actually added a discussion of that article to my article I co-authored with Rob Carter at creation.com/fitness. I actually included a discussion of that article in that article that we wrote specifically because of you. So you
Oh, well,
you have contributed.
Well, I'm flattered by it to hear that.
You have contributed
Can
to
you
my
refresh,
work and more importantly to Dr. Rob Carter's work. So
can you refresh my memory on what the response was? Because that study is beautiful because of the fact that they weren't using a natural population. They mutagenized those phages, right? They hit them with, they were experiencing every mutation, right? So what was the response? If you could refresh my memory, because I genuinely don't remember and I apologize.
well, okay, I'll quote a few relevant points here. The paper that you're referring to, it begins by saying evolution at high mutation rates is expected to reduce population fitness deterministically by the accumulation of deleterious mutations. A high enough rate should even cause extinction, lethal mutagenesis, a principle motivating the clinical use of mutagenic drugs to treat viral infections.
Yeah, is that what happened in the study? Because that was the expectation going in. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So
no, it's not. The opposite
I
happened.
know. So I'm going to get to that because this paper, this is a weird paper, to be honest, and it's actually a confusing and self-contradictory paper. And I can tell you that behind the scenes, when I shared this paper with Rob Carter, that was also his reaction of this is just a flat out bad paper. And it's
I would love to hear
interesting.
why.
They claim that fitness increased.
It did.
And then they say a main plausible explanation for the fitness increase is adaptive evolution, a process that lies outside the model. So right off the bat, they're admitting that adaptive evolution lies outside their model.
Their
which
model
is
of lethal mutagenesis. Yes, the idea
exactly, yeah,
exactly. So they were trying to model a process called lethal mutagenesis, where mutations accumulate and drive a population to extinction. And they go into some math in that paper, and adaptive evolution doesn't play a role in their model that they based their predictions on. But
yeah.
when they did the experiment, which I mean, I think when you do the experiment, you go by what the experiment shows rather than what your model shows, right? If the experiment shows your model's wrong, you change your model, right? So when they did the experiment, it contradicted their model because what they found was the constant generation of extremely high fitness genotypes. The maximum fitness of those populations actually improved during that experiment. And at no point did those populations go extinct. And this refutes genetic entropy because those populations, again, they were not natural populations, they were mutagenized. They experienced every possible mutation in those populations. And if Sanford is correct, if the vast majority of mutations are both harmful and non-selectable, let's put aside that that's a contradiction. I don't care. Let's give Sanford, let's let it go. If Sanford's model is correct, then a population experiencing every possible mutation will not be able to increase its fitness, right?
Well, this
But
is the problem with the paper is that they claimed that fitness increased,
they
but
directly
then
measured
when
it, to
you
be
when
clear.
you look at their actual measurements,
Mhm.
it contradicts their claim.
The maximum
So,
increased and the average decreased, which is consistent with the population genetics that we're talking about, that you
well,
find rare high fitness genotypes, but most genotypes are suboptimal compared to the ancestral state.
there were two parameters for fitness in this paper: the lysis time and the burst size.
Mhm. Yep.
So when you read what they said, it says lysis time was difficult. So for those not familiar, lysis time would be the time it takes for the bacterium to burst and the viruses to come out, the new viruses.
Mhm.
So the lysis time went. It says lysis time was difficult to quantify precisely because phage release spanned several minutes. Lysis
Mhm.
time around 18 minutes and absorption rate were largely unchanged from initial values. Okay,
Right.
so lysis time was largely unchanged. So the amount of time it took the bacterium to burst didn't really change.
So the
But then
viruses
they
didn't get
also
faster at killing the host necessarily, right?
so it didn't get faster at killing,
But
and they recorded an 80% drop in burst size, which means that
average.
that's fewer bacteriophages coming out on
Is
the
that
other end.
average burst size or maximum burst size? I'll tell you, it's
Um,
average burst size. They recorded a drop in average, but they also recorded an increase in maximum. And
okay,
that's
but
the key finding.
that means that the maximum was an outlier.
But that's okay because we're talking about rare beneficial mutations, right? If we accept the premise that most mutations are harmful, then we would expect mutagenizing a population to, in general, decrease fitness. But if Sanford's model is correct, it should go into terminal fitness decline. And what actually happened is most of the population got worse. Some of that population got better, which means they found those rare beneficial mutations. If Sanford's model is correct, that finding is literally impossible. And that's why that paper, which is one of the few papers that actually shows a study of every mutation that's right? We're talking mutagenizing these viruses. We're not looking at a natural population. We're artificially mutagenizing them to hit as much of the sequence space as possible, as quickly as possible. So according to Sanford, when you do that, because almost all mutations are harmful, and the vast majority of those are unselectable, so they're going to accumulate without any way to stop them. The population must go extinct in that scenario. But
Well,
instead, what we saw is
and
an
I can
increase
respond
in
to
the
that.
maximum.
I can respond to that too. And so you're clinging to this like outlier that occurred and ignoring that the average fitness went way down. And it is bizarre. And I actually contacted the corresponding author for this,
Mhm.
which is JJ Bull.
Oh yeah, he's great.
And he said, having looked at the paper again, it is the case that we did not have an easy explanation for the
Yeah.
increase in fitness.
Mhm.
The burst size went down, so if lysis time stayed the same, there was a big variance complicating estimation of the mean, then fitness should have gone down.
But it went up.
What we suggest as a possibility is that the means of burst size and lysis time should not be used to parameterize the fitness model when there are large variances.
Yeah, a
But
better.
I'm sorry, that is the fitness model.
But
It's
no, that's wrong. The metric for viruses for how you measure fitness is called doubling time, which burst size and lysis time are parts of that, but you measure it empirically by doing a single generation and then diluting them to the point where you can actually count how many there are, and then doing the math based on the dilution. So like it's actually doubling time is the way you do the calculation. So the things that you asked Bull about are he's right in what he says, and it's consistent with what I'm saying. Yeah, it's that simple. Like, yes, that's what those words mean.
yeah, I
My
understand.
point is, if I could just be clear though, my point is that Sanford's model predicts, and it must predict, that when you mutagenize a population to the point where you're sampling the totality of sequence space, right? You're inducing every possible mutation, right? That population is dead. It may be immediate, it may be in a few generations, but that population is doomed. That's what Sanford's model demands. That is, there's no way that can't be the case.
Well,
If Sanford is
not
correct.
every individual is going to possess every single possible mutation simultaneously, though.
But the population
that's
will decline, right?
yeah, the
On that, like,
population declines. Now, we did contact John Sanford for his take on this particular experiment, and what he stated. You said that why didn't we observe the mutational meltdown? Well, the simple answer is that they did not proceed long enough.
Right.
Because that wasn't the point of their experiment. They weren't trying to kill this population.
That's literally what
he was crystal clear.
Testing.
Yeah, he was crystal clear that 200 generations is not long enough for the full effects of genetic entropy.
Yep.
It's not long enough to have actual mutational meltdown occurring.
Okay, so two things.
All they did was go 200 generations. That's
Okay.
not long enough.
Bull said that 200 generations is not long enough for genetic entropy. He said that?
No. Dr. Sanford said that.
Oh, okay, Sanford said that. Okay,
Dr.
the other
Sanford
thing is that
said 200 generations is not long enough for extinction to happen.
The other thing is that Sanford conflates two opposite things here when he talks about mutational meltdown. He does this in the book too, because mutational meltdown is the opposite of genetic entropy. It's when a population gets below the minimum viable population size, and you have a loss of heterozygosity and an increase in recessive deleterious traits. So mutational, and he does this in the book as well. Mutational meltdown is the literal opposite process from genetic entropy, where genetic entropy is an increase in diversity, an increase in heterozygosity. Mutational meltdown is a loss of diversity, a loss of heterozygosity. So those are opposite things that I'm not sure that's clear, but Sanford makes that error in a couple places.
Yeah. Well, I am glad that you brought up this paper because, again, I know you were probably not able to watch the presentation because you were driving.
Yeah, I was at work. Yeah, sorry.
I talked about average absolute fitness over time. And that's what
and in that study it went up. The absolute went up. The max went up.
Not the average. So
no, but the
word average is important there. We can't just throw the word average out. Okay.
Population won't go extinct though if the maximum goes up.
Well, but it will when you can't say, oh well, we have one individual here that didn't have all those deleterious mutations, so it was doing good. Again, genetic entropy is about the population, and the actual evidence that we have from this paper shows an 80% reduction of burst size. That means essentially 80% fewer viruses being produced, and the lysis time didn't change. That's what happened here. That is genetic entropy. It's genetic entropy in action. You're losing.
Wait a minute. Hang on now, Paul. Hang on now. You got to be consistent. You got to be consistent, Paul. Did they measure the sequences? Did they actually do anything and show that these mutations cause this problem? Because the standard you established earlier, when I caught like just a snippet in the car, was looking at specific mutations and their fitness effects.
No, I was saying no. You can't. We don't determine genetic entropy by lining up specific nucleotides with each other
and testing their fitness effects.
That's not how we do it. But what we observe is that 80% drop of burst size over 200 generations with no change in lysis time.
But did the
fitness declined? It didn't increase.
No, they specifically said that maximum fitness increased.
If I'm a statistician and I present my findings by ignoring the overall bulk of the evidence and I only talk about the outlier that occurred, that is misleading and dishonest statistics.
So
and that's what they did here.
Two quick questions, because I feel like we're going in circles here, Paul. Just to be clear, the maximum fitness that they measured in that study went up, right? Just to be clear, the maximum fitness went up. If a population is undergoing its population genetics in such a way that there are some subset of individuals whose fitness goes up over time, is that population going to go extinct?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, because the average fitness for the population went down, and once you hit a certain point, you're dead as a population.
Definition for extinction?
Because that individual that you're talking about that had the higher fitness.
It was one?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how many it was.
It was a lot. It was a lot.
Well, we're talking about viruses. We're talking
about bajillions, right? It's a lot.
Well, that's fine. But the average still declined by 80%. That's a huge drop.
But the population is still viable, and you can, and again, they did the math on it. You can do the math on it. Ask Sanford to do the population genetics math for you. Like that population
but you're
was
ignoring
not going
the fact
extinct. They went for
you're
200
ignoring the fact that the only thing they actually observed was decline in average fitness by 80% over 200 generations.
You keep saying the wrong words there, and I think you're doing it on purpose. They didn't observe the 80% was burst size. It wasn't fitness, right?
Well, I know, but there's only two
thing.
components. There's only two components: lysis time, burst size. That's all they used.
One of them stayed the same, right?
One of them stayed the same. One of them dropped
by 80% on average. So if you put stay the same and drop on average by 80% together, do you get an 80% average drop?
Well,
no, it's the average
you're
drop.
You're equivocating between two different parameters. No, you're equivocating between lysis time and burst size.
Yeah, because to get average fitness, you have to combine them, right? And you're taking the measure from one of them and saying that in its totality is fitness, right? You're saying the 80% drop in one means an 80% drop in fitness.
No, I don't think that at all. The lysis time didn't change.
Exactly. But you just said an 80% drop in fitness, right? You just said that.
All right, my mistake. An 80% drop in burst size. And let me tell you this, Dan. Out of everybody that's come on here tonight, and we had Zach Hancock, and we had Joel Duff.
Oh, I missed Joel Duff, man. I missed so much fun while I was at work. This isn't fair.
But I have enjoyed this little brief a discussion that you're having with me right now infinitely more than I enjoyed anybody else that came tonight.
My heart already. So much.
Because I appreciate you being here, and I'm sure you're going to watch the presentation and make some kind of a slam video against me later, and I'm expecting that, and I won't be offended.
You know what? Just because you said that, I'm going to try. The new semester just started. I'm really busy, but just because you said that, I'm going to try. I'm going to make sure. I'm definitely going to watch it, but I'm going to try to do something with it.
Well, it's up to you, but I did pray for your I did pray for your salvation tonight, so I hope that comes through.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Paul.
Because if that happens, then you will become probably among the best creation scientists ever to live. That's my prediction.
I keep saying I should sell out. I could probably make more money if AIG hired me, because I could do better work than all they do.
Well, I don't know about the money part, but I know that if you applied your critical skills to tearing down evolution like you apply it to trying to tear down creation, I think we'd have something going on here. So
I appreciate that, but why would I do it for something that's wrong?
Okay, well.
Paul, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you staying late to talk to me. Donnie and Sam, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Our pleasure. Lots of fun.
Right,
that was a very good ending to tonight, and it ended on a high note.
I think Dan ended our last open mic with you too, Paul, if I'm not mistaken. Historical.
Did I always get here late?
No. The last time it was Mark.
Dan does it on purpose. He wants to be the main event. Actually, behind the scenes, we all work it out that way. So. Yeah. This has been fun. Thanks for joining, Dr. Dan.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. So that was my relatively brief conversation with Paul Price on the topic of genetic entropy, and specifically talking about the paper, the direct experimental evidence that invalidates Dr. Sanford's model. I hope you found that informative, feel like you got something out of it. And I also just want to say, Paul, I would love to have you on for a longer, less time-constrained conversation on this topic. I think that would be really great. I'm just going to make the pitch right here. you can go and watch my videos with creationists. I think I'm, a polite and courteous host, and people have generally come away feeling positive about their interactions on this channel. So, Paul, if you see this, reach out to me. Use the email down below because I couldn't find yours. But use my channel email, creationmythschannel@gmail. Shoot me a message and we can set something up for a longer conversation. Thank you for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button, share it, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and don't get fooled.